Okay, let's get started. So today we have our final exam review that we're going to start out with. And then I'm probably going to get interrupted by an attendance person. So I'll pause everything and we'll take a few attendance for like 10 or 15 minutes. It's an interesting thing that's going on, but you'll see it when we get there. And then after this, I have some examples about some features related to content providers, a couple of them, databases. Let me look at my cheat sheet here. Database notifications, camera features. Hello. I'm sorry, I just can't yell over you today. All right, thank you. And we'll pick up where we left off, and see as far as we get. So the exam is on Monday, a week from today. It is not on Wednesday. We do have class on Wednesday, however, but everyone wanted the review today, so they have longer to practice. The other thing too is I want to go over some of the assignments as well, just to reiterate a couple points on the assignments, because I haven't done that yet in this class. So all the assignments will be due as well on Monday. The assignments for this particular class are pretty easy, actually. There's only one or two challenging ones, but I'll talk about that in terms of what the expectation is. But the rest of them are fairly easy, actually. I mean, I think they're super easy, too easy. So I'm actually going to change the assignments for the next time I teach the class, make them not quite as easy. So there's no excuses. You can't tell me that the assignments were too hard. All right. All right, so what do we got for the final exam? We have a 25-point multiple choice, and there's 4 pages to the exam, and there's 25 questions. There's absolutely no source code writing. You don't have to worry about that. A good percentage of the questions are also true-false. In fact, one page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, about half the exam actually is true-false. So you have 50% chance of it being right or wrong. There's no excuses for not doing well in this exam either. Oh, hold on, we're going to do attendance. Okay.
I was busy.
That's okay. Let me pause this for a second. Alright, so I think I was on, I didn't even start. I was talking about how many true-false questions there were on this. Way too many. So every time I write an exam, I always walk away from it going, I wonder if this was easy or hard. This one was particularly easy, I think. So are the assignments for this course. So you guys really got it made this term. So no excuses. The exam is easy, the assignments are easy, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So 25 multiple choice questions. 1 point per question. Here are the topics to study. So, now you don't have to write any source code. You don't even have to look at any source code either. There's no source code in here at all. So you need to be familiar with the Android parts and pieces and development platform. So, what does that mean? The concept of the class files. The concepts, actually, all you have to do is open up Eclipse. And in fact, it would probably be easier if I just open up Eclipse to explain what it is I'm talking about. So although there are no programming questions, there are questions about the makeup of the application itself. Components, the pieces, the parts. Also the object lifecycle. I remember that correctly. So let me close this example here and open up an Android project. Let's open up the first example. We're going to look at the content provider. Take a look at here. So we know we have source code files that are all class objects. We know that we can extend a class object. We know that we're working with an API. And the APIs have different versions to them. We know that there's a manifest file and what the manifest file is being used for. We know that we have project properties, and in the project properties we can see the different Android releases. We know that there are different emulators that are available built into the Android API, also outside of the API. No questions that are particular about APIs outside of the concept of needing one. There's no questions about, what does this one support, what does that one support. It's not like a trivia thing. It's do you understand the concept of what it means to develop in this particular platform and the project components. So that's kind of an important concept. So knowing that we set permissions and things in the manifest, we set more than just that. I mean, we're setting all sorts of different things in the manifest. So go ahead and look up the manifest, read about that. A good source of information for you would be the developer, and then this brings in another topic I need to talk about tonight, but the developer.android.com, I believe it was over this weekend and got a facelift. It was either this weekend or it was last week. And a couple of students pointed out that not all of the tutorials that are part of the assignments are available. However, there's mirrored sites. So I'm going to talk about that when I start talking about the assignments. All of the tutorials are still here. They're just not easy to find. So there's no excuses on the assignments either. But if you use this sort of like the textbook for the course, you'll be in good shape. So what you might want to do is kind of go through and look at, in terms of the examples, you'll be able to find, this is the same interface I was showing you a couple weeks ago, or about a week ago actually, that had a yellow border on the top of it, or yellow and green or something, and it had a totally different look and feel to it, and it had all the sample projects and everything. They just gave it a facelift essentially. But you know, if you click on some of the links and you go into patterns, it'll go into some of the design patterns and stuff, app structure. So it's actually not a bad idea to use this as your textbook, I guess, or you know, if you have the Deedle and Deedle book, go ahead and read through a couple of the first chapters, and you'll get all the information that you need in terms of the application structure, the application life cycle. You can also use the lectures for this course as a great review mechanism, the PowerPoints. But you'll find there's a ton of really nice examples and stuff in here that they've added. And so feel free to venture out into that. So let me see. The UI interface done in XML. No questions about XML, although it's pretty simple, but I'm not going to ask you XML specific questions. We know XML is a tagging system for data, but if you remember a couple weeks, well, about right in the beginning of the course, I had a lecture on XML. Nothing from that lecture, actually, so not an XML programming course. But the menu design techniques, context menus, options menus, the different menus, and where you're going to get most of that stuff is from the mini tutorial. So if I go back up here and I go into the bhacker.com website, let me show you something real quick then. And I go into summer 2012 and I click on the Android phone option here, and if I look at the lectures option here, we have these lectures here, which are the ones I've been going over for most of the course. And then we have these tutorials down here. Some of them are duplicated, so some of them, these are short. These tutorials are about, I don't know, 5-6 slides long, but the tutorials themselves have all of the different information that these lectures have up here, but they're focused. I've gone over a couple of them actually. There's some that I didn't go over. And again, I'll leave this as well for additional study material. But there's one in here, and I probably should label them, but there's one in here on menus, there's one in here on, in fact, I believe there's one that is, I particularly pulled out recently, that is number 8, tutorial number 8, which actually covered it, but I wanted to point it out to you. It's on, and let me just load it up here so you can actually kind of see what's in this particular menu. I'm going to start this menu, but on the GUI menus themselves, so I'm creating options menus, the context menus, the sub-menus, all of the different particulars about how to create the menus. I actually showed you a couple of examples with this already, but if you're looking for like some more additional information, it's a great resource to look at. There's one on threads, but you don't have to worry about threads if there's no questions on threads or sockets. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But okay, so the menus themselves, how to create a context menu, how to create an options menu. Knowing that you press on it long, you get a different menu than if you press the menu button on the phone. Knowing the difference in terms of the terminology is good as well. You don't need to worry about navigation of the Eclipse or the tool sets. Well, primarily because Eclipse has changed so much, and the Android SDKs and the implementation, the plugin has changed significantly, and depending upon which version you have, you might have had a different user experience. Therefore, there's no questions on it. So you don't have to worry about, or the install of the tools. You don't have to really know anything about the install. Hopefully, you got it installed, because hopefully you're going to be using it to hopefully create your projects. No questions on emulators or virtual boxes or anything of that nature either. All that stuff is sort of extra. Extra stuff you don't need to know. You want to know about the file system. Yes, about the resource directory, about the layout directory, about the menu. Wrong, we covered a couple actually with a download file. That's where we're sticking information we can stick in there, text files that we can load, read, write to. MP3 files, anything raw that in terms of just a file that doesn't fit into the Android structure. It's not a layout, it's not a menu, but maybe it's an audio file, or maybe it's certainly not an icon, but it's something that we're going to use inside of the project that's just a generic file, as an example. Knowing that this stuff here is also out in terms of the project, so if I take a look at the projects themselves, go into the workspace directory, I'm just going to click on one of these that I know is a download file, here we go, is a Android project. Knowing that we have a assets directory, bin, gen, source. I'm not going to ask you what are the 5 directories or whatever. It's not like that. It's like, what are some things that would be in the source directory? They would be source code files. They would be anything written in Java is in the source code directory. What were some of the things that are in the resource directory? Well, the icons for the program, the user interfaces, the strings, string.html, XML file, the layouts, the values are holding the strings. I'm not going to ask you the name of the subdirectories or anything like that. It's not as specific as that. It's more conceptual based, concept based versus rote memorization. I'm not going to ask you how many different drawable directories are there. But we have multiple different drawable directories because we have different resolutions and different screen types and stuff like that to support. Knowing that the resource r.java functionality, it's automatically created, if you remember. It takes all of the resource components, the strings, the XML menus, the interfaces, the UIs, the things, main.xml, all of it's loaded and compacted into Java because we're taking XML and we're translating it into Java because we need to compile it into a Java class, and we're creating a Java program that's running on the Android. So we get .class files, and we have to actually have Java work with Java in order for that to happen. So we have r.java that's created automatically for us, and that's the resource file, and we don't edit that. Instead, Eclipse, or actually the compiler if we were running it without Eclipse. You don't even need Eclipse, actually. You can run it manually if you want. Creates that for us automatically so it can compile in the methods, the data members and the associations with it along and create that .class file for compatibility. How and where resources are stored, used, and generated. Well, actually, really not too much to know about that, only because it's done for you automatically. So, in terms of that resource file. So, how to set permissions and setting associated with the Android manifest, and the settings associated with the Android manifest. So, as a review mechanism, actually, while creating your projects for the course, and I'll talk about that next. You can open up the manifest and see, well, what can you set in the manifest? Something like maybe like the package information for the project, the name of the project, the version of the project, perhaps. We have the application information in here, the application name, the icon for the application, permissions that are set on the application, stuff like that in terms of components. So. And feel free, I feel like I'm going through this kind of fast, so feel free to stop me if you have any questions. In fact, this is your opportunity, and even Wednesday is your opportunity to say, hey, is this on the exam? Is that on the exam? And I have a copy of the exam with me, and I'll go through it question by question I'm not going to read you the questions, but I'll take a look at it to cross-check it against this list as well, just to make sure I haven't missed anything. Knowing the concept of intents, intent filters, services, networks, mapping, and content providers. I actually had a lecture on this that went into all of this stuff. And it's more of a surface level, as an example, intents. Do you know why an intent is being used? What does an intent do? In terms of the concept, bare minimum you want to know. It's switching between one process and another process, one activity and another activity, and we register the activities with the manifest, and we say these activities are allowed to run in our program, and we create a new intent. I say new intent, start this activity. We start the activity and we close the previous activity. Because it kind of gets into the concept of switching between activities, switching between functionality. Don't have to use an intent. We can pass information back and forth using intents as well. We pass the data from one intent to another. The concept of services, background processes that are running on the phone. We're going to look at notifications tonight, but that was sort of a, not really a service, but sort of a different concept that I didn't put on here, but it's part of the concept as well in terms of the different components, ways of running your code and interacting with the iOS, or the OS, excuse me. Let's see, networking, mapping. Remember the mapping stuff we did? The mapping key from Google. The web view component, loading on a Google API in the manifest, telling it use this package here that from google.com to support mapping functionality. No specific questions about TCP or UDP in terms of the networking. No questions on threads either. I'm not going to ask you about thread programming. We did cover that last time though, but left it out. Concepts of using files and databases. We've seen the file interface so far. We actually saw earlier on in the course a program that opens up and reads the files and writes to a file that was stored in the raw directory. Tonight we're going to see the database. So we have a database example that we'll see. And the reason why I can cover databases all in one shot is because there's, it's just databases. It's SQLite. It's the same thing as you get with a regular level database class. And it's impossible for me to teach you and give you a full database class in this class. Instead, each program, and I talked about this actually earlier on in the course, so you just haven't seen the example yet, where you can save data in a file, you can save data in a database, you can save data in a content provider. And essentially, these are just resources that are available for reading and writing information that's going to stick around longer than the execution of your program. And when you create a database in the Android system, it's only visible to the running Android application. So databases aren't used to share information between different applications, apps on the phone. Instead, one program, one app opens up, creates a table, loads of information into the table, and uses it. And it's only visible for that particular app. And where a content provider, in contrast, and we'll see that tonight as well in an example, those are used with a lot more flexibility because you can read and write to the contact lists, which is what we're going to see in an example, and you can use it to share information between applications because every app on the phone could actually use the contact list. And it can use the directory of this or that or whatever it happens to be information that's shared by the content provider. And we'll talk about actually providers a little bit. I'm going to show you some examples actually further along tonight. So being familiar with the platform kernel OS, i.e. processes, modules, kernel configuration, background, nah. I think I only have one question on the entire concept. Not a huge area. If you remember in the beginning of the course, probably lecture number 1 or 2, I talked about the Linux kernel, and the fact that each program runs in one process. That's why we have intents, because we switch programs inside of the process from one to another. We're not opening up multiple processes. But outside of that, we're looking at a Linux box. The whole phone runs on a Linux kernel. And each one of the different builds for the APIs is running off of a different breed of Linux. That's 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, all the way up to 4 something right now. The processes, the modules, kernel, the whole thing works the same way. But this isn't a Linux class, and we're not building Android kernels. But if we wanted to, we could have a proprietary piece of software, a proprietary piece of hardware that we've created, and build our own Linux, build your own OS, essentially, from an open source Linux kernel. Same way as you're loading the ISO files in VirtualBox, actually. And you can install it on your hardware, as an example, and then all of a sudden you have an embedded system. So Android as a platform is used on Google phones and stuff like that, but it's also used on proprietary hardware. So people that make products that want to support embedded systems, nice to load an Android kernel on there, and you've got a Linux system. Just like you have UC Linux and embedded systems, Linux, it's the next generation of embedded systems essentially is that Android kernel. But we didn't really cover any of that in this class, so we don't really have to worry about that for the final. It's only 1 or 2 questions on the concept. Being familiar with the application lifecycle, that I did cover. There's a nice little diagram actually showing you the on create, which is sort of the essential concept, on pause, on resume, on destroy, all of the different states that that particular process can go into from the beginning to the end of the application. I'm not going to ask you to list out the states, but knowing that there is a life cycle to it and knowing that it does shift between, of course you want to know about on create. That's a no-brainer. If you've created one application, one activity application, you know about on create. So it's some of this stuff you can't like read in a book, and you can't read off the Android website. You have to actually kind of experience the application development process yourself. And the questions are all based upon the programming assignments and based upon the working with the API. So if you're cheating through the course and not doing your own assignments, you're going to have a difficult time on the exam. If you've done the assignments yourself, then you'll ace the exam. It's too easy for you. So it's like, you know, have you seen the Android API before? Do you know what you're doing? Can you navigate through the directory structure? Do you know where to put a string if you wanted to create a string? Do you know where to put a layout? Kind of thing, you know, kind of concept. It's really basic. Not what I call a challenging exam. No programming questions that require Java syntax or semantics, but there are some method questions. Methods in terms of concepts of running methods. You know, the getting the text and the setting the text on a label or something, or a button. The value of a button. Now I'm not going to ask you method names, nothing about, you don't have to memorize all the different names of different methods that are running, but the concept of running a method, concept of creating an instance of an object, which is kind of core to the concept of object orientation. So that's going to overlap. If you're taking the Java course, this part kind of overlaps with that a little bit, and there's only 1 or 2 questions on the entire concept. Not a lot. Questions about dialog and alert box and similar features. Yeah, creating an alert, a dialog, a toast message as an example. You know, different ways of getting, and this is all concept based, you know, different ways of getting a message out to the user, essentially. The toast feature is kind of a, you know, the dialog is kind of a pop a message out, show the user, you know, hey dummy, you know, enter your username first before pressing send or something. The concept of being able to throw up a dialog box with a yes or no button on it. There's an entire lecture, one of the tutorials I went through a couple weeks back that showed you dialogues and alerts. We actually covered, and that's where I say if you go through those lectures, you'll refresh your memory, because we did actually cover, for an 8-week course, we actually did cover a lot of different topics, and so it's really hard to know exactly every detail about it, which is why the coverage is spanning all of this information, but it's not going into that much detail. You don't have to know how to write or create a dialog box, but you want to know that you can, and what kind of dialogues, you know, what kind of alerts, and what kind of concepts actually are associated with that. Know what application components are, for example, an activity. The 4 different, and I'll leave you this with homework, know the 4 different types. Like, what do you mean? If you don't know that one, find that one. That's your Easter egg hunt. 4 different types. If you can't answer that question, I say that's when you really need to go back and look through those lectures. Because the lecture, that's in actually a couple of the lectures right in the beginning of the course. Activity is one of the types, by the way. So. These are different types of applications. So. And actually, if you go through the examples, you'll see one of each one of the types as well. So. Well, what are we extending? Are we extending activity, or are we extending something else? So. Alright, so what about the UI components? Know about the UI components, for example, views, view groups, widgets. I'm not going to ask you what the something is called. But remember that layout menu, the 4 different types of layouts. Actually, there's a couple lectures I gave you that had the layouts, had the views, view groups, had web view in there, map view in there. The concept of the view, concept of the view group, the hierarchy of the layout, essentially. There's a couple of lectures actually that showed it looked like an organization chart. You know, it's a hierarchy of how the components are broken down. That's also available on the Android website, the developer's website. Which I always say is really good reading, because, you know, and what you can do is, you know, oh, I'm not familiar with view groups. Do a Google search on it. You know? It's impossible not to find something on the concept, you know. So just basically make sure you know all of these different things that are listed here. Because I know some people are strong in some areas and weak in other areas, depending upon what you're focusing on. And depending upon your background and how much exposure you have had to this platform. Know the hierarchy of the components. I think I just went through that. Layouts, views, different types of layouts, relative layout, linear layouts, that stuff. The lecture covers both of them. Be familiar with the event-driven behavior concepts, listeners, know how callbacks are performed. Google that word as well, or go on the website. To actually put that into the search on the Android website, you'll get like four pages of callback information on that. Also, the concept and not listed here is action listeners. You know, like button clicks, on-click listeners, on-touch listeners. I'm not going to ask you to list down what are the different types of listeners that you can put on this, but the concept of how to use a listener, how to create the activity, and then inside of the activity create events that are going to occur that are associated with buttons and labels and all sorts of GUI components that you can actually put a listener on. And when the user clicks this button, it's going to open up, it's going to start this intent, and it's going to open up this other activity. It's going to take them to this menu or to that menu or something. Know the categories of sensors. I'm not going to, again, you don't have to know. In fact, this is not too long ago, actually. It was like a couple lectures ago I talked about sensors. Accelerometer is an example. The phone knows when it's in layout or portrait mode. It knows when it's been dropped on the ground. It knows when it has an incoming call. It knows a lot of stuff. Those are sensors. And like when you shake it, it knows you've shaken it. It knows when it's moving, when it's upside down, right side up. So the features that are available for the API interface, do you really need to know all the different categories of the sensors? No. But be familiar with the concept of what a sensor actually is. So, in fact, there's sensors for temperature. It knows when its battery is going to be low or when it's running low. It knows when it's going to shut off. Sends up a little warning that says, hey, I'm overheating. I've never actually seen that, but apparently there's an overheating sensor. Apparently, one of the first generation ones, if you were on the phone too long, actually, have you ever noticed it? The longer you stay on the telephone call, the warmer your phone gets. The thing can actually overheat. There's a temperature sensor on there that turns on, like on a computer, the temperature sensor would turn on a fan. This is a computer. But we don't really have fans on the phone. Don't make too much noise. But plus, where are you going to stick them? I think the fan would be bigger than the phone. But there's a sensor in there that slows something down or it does something to protect itself. Or sends up a message that says, hey, your phone, I'm overheating. But I've never seen it, though. So I'm assuming it's there. Know the categories of the sensors, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so be familiar with the DDMS as a debugging tool. There's also the log feature that I mentioned in the beginning of the course. When you write to log dot, in fact, I'll reiterate that point when we go through some examples today. You can write messages that show up in the log, and actually you can filter on like bookmarks or whatever that you're sticking in the log file. I'm not going to ask you how to do that, but know that there is a log available. Also know that the log is a debugging tool. It's not available on apps that you, essentially apps that you create and you put out, in the App Store or whatever, in Google Play. You actually take off the logs. You don't want it logging. You don't have any debugging, anything like that going on. And last time I was supposed to show you Google Play and I forgot, so I'm going to make sure I show that to you now, because eventually you're going to want to put an app out there, right? Be familiar with miscellaneous app interfaces such as the action bar, long touches to bring up the menus, menu presses to go back, the back button, I'm not going to ask you anything particular about any particular model of a phone or anything like that, but its features in terms of miscellaneous interfaces. Bringing options, menus, basic navigational features that are part of the Android environment. If you have an Android phone, you already know all those features. There's a menu button on the phone. So it kind of comes in handy if you've actually gotten a tablet or a phone or something and you're familiar with the, these are miscellaneous questions that are going to fall into that category. This lecture, by the way, is also posted on the bhacker.com website, and it is right up towards the top, just because I forgot to point it out. It's this one right here, Final Exam Review. It's the one I've been going over. So if you've missed anything, came in late or something, you can get this file actually out there. So now what I'm going to do is kind of make a checklist through my questions. I have the exam right here, actually. So now you can ask me, is this question on there? And go, yeah, here it is. No, it's not on here. All right, so we have a manifest. Activity-related question. Okay. Services. Yeah, on-create method. Question about on-create method. Life cycle. Standard life cycle. That's what I'm saying. That's page 1. Page 2. Oh wow, intents. Intent question. Content provider question. UI question. XML question, but it's about elements in the UI interface. It's done on menu. It's more of a menu question actually. Inputs. Event listeners. Another intent question. Looks like there's more than I remembered. Intent objects. What's this? Implicit. Oh wow, another intent. There's a lot of intent questions, by the way. I'm seeing more than I expected. Data storage question. File question. Security question. It's actually a pretty good question. Permissions question. Sensor question. Maps question. Maps question with permissions. No vaguely, not related to the maps, but know vaguely what permission categories there are. We have only like internet as an example, file, SD, well, we didn't actually cover SD cards, not on here. Course location, find location, stuff like that in terms of the map API, permissions. Actually, that's it. Really, that's the main categories that we've covered actually. So. Context menu question. Options menu question. Hey, the directory structure question. DDMS question. R.Java question. There is a true-false question on Linux, actually. Let me see. It's actually very easy question. It's a true-false as well, so it's not anything. It's not anything you can't handle. Seriously, you probably, without even taking this class, you could probably answer that question. So, action bar. Action bar question. And alert dialog question. So there's an options question, context menu, alert. This specifically says alert dialog on it. There's also a toast question on here too. That's all the questions. Well, there's only 25 of them. So. But most of them are true-false, so it's actually kind of easy, I think. Almost too easy. So next time I teach this course, I'm going to totally rewrite it because the assignments are too easy, the exam's too easy, everything's too easy. Questions on the final exam, that's too easy. And I'm not lying to you. So I've done this before, and students come in, hey, that wasn't that easy. No, this one really is easy. No questions? All right, let's talk a few minutes here. Well, you can think of some, you can tell me. I'm going to shut this window because I don't need Microsoft Office anymore. I'm too lazy to install it on my Mac side, so I'm using my Windows side for it. Instead, I'm using a free OpenOffice, but it doesn't really give you the same formatting. So, all right. So before I hit some examples that I haven't hit yet, I want to talk about the assignments for this particular course. And I'm going to leave this running on the same review lecture, so because people who are watching this are going to, oops, wrong one. People who are watching this are going to want to know about the assignments as well. Assignment number 1 for this course, here they are here, is Hello World. We did this in class if you remember. This one's already done. When you submit the assignment, make sure you put it into a zip file. Just take the entire project directory, go into Workspace, right mouse click, say compress. You get a little zip file and then upload it into the EMS. It's as easy as that. Assignment number 2. The links changed on here. Did the links change? Actually, let's take a look here. These are old. Links did change. Let me go to the website here. If you have downloaded the assignments in hopes of getting them done and you haven't done them yet, then you want to download them again. Well, the ones you haven't done. If you've already done the assignment, you've done the correct assignment, you've gone to the main site. So what I've had to do is I recently, actually as of today, replaced 2, 3, 4 with modified versions with different links because there's a mirror website now that you have to use. And if you haven't seen the assignments yet, now's a good opportunity to take a look here. This is a good one here. It's the same tutorial. Let me kind of make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. So assignment number 1 is Hello World. Assignment number 2 is Hello Localization. And I actually went through, this is why I'm saying there's absolutely no excuses why anyone in this class cannot do these assignments yourself. There's no need to cheat. There's no need to recycle assignments. In fact, you can't really, because these are different. But long story short, I've given you all of the assignments already. First one I did in class with you. You should have that one. I did this one in class for you as well. The last class period. We went over, I remember the hello. In fact, it's out there on the website. You can actually download it. But don't turn that assignment in because it doesn't meet the requirements. So what do you need to do? There's an exercise that you're going to run, and this link has been changed. It's unit testing. So let me take a quick look here. I'm going to copy and paste this and put it into a web browser. It's kind of big now. This is great. Let's see. Make it smaller so I can see what I'm doing. The assignments are based on Android tutorials that are on the developer website. This particular one is the same one that the guy plagiarized and put on a private website. It was easier to show you this when it was to go to the mirrored site. So that's why I put this link on here. This is the assignment, however. It's the same one that's on the other website, but it's, believe it or not, plagiarized on here. But long story short, you want to run through and go through the steps of these projects. When you get all done, the finished project, the finished steps after you've taken this that's in textual form and you've put it into the Android API, you've created a project in Eclipse, and you've followed through the steps and you made the changes and you run and you tested it and it works. That's your finished product. That's your assignment. There's no write-up. There's no additional information. It does not get submitted in the form of a Word file. It gets submitted in the form of a project zip file. Zipped or RARed or TARed or however you want to put it together. I don't need the assignment back. I don't need any Microsoft anything. It's just a zip file. So here is what we have is an introduction to JUnit. And on Wednesday, I'm going to be talking about unit testing if I don't get to it today. That's our last topic for this course, actually. But it is one of the main focuses of the beginning one. This does nothing more than create a test case for you. It shows you how to create a test case. So I'm expecting to see a project that has a test case created in it. That there's no thinking. You just run through, okay, step number 1, create a new project to test. Step number 2, you just follow through the steps. And then at the end, you run it and you see if the test passed or failed. You get this output. And it's more of an exercise to orient you to the interface. That's the first part of the assignment. The second part is the localization exercise. If you look at the localization exercise, this one actually is at the original site. but the location on the original site has changed. So I updated the link so you'll see when you click on it, it's going to the Android site. It's going through the same tutorial, so don't be concerned. I have, this feeling that people are going to go, well, I downloaded this and I did the assignment, but was it the old? It's the same. The assignments are identical, whether or not you use the old websites or whether you use the new websites. The problem is over the weekend they revamped the webs. All the URLs have changed, but the tutorials are the same. So here we have the localization tutorial, where you're going to go through and you're going to, follow through the steps, and you're going to write an application very similar to the one I saw, if you were here, that I did for you actually. You can use that as an example to help you with it. It might be very similar, however, as well. It's going to be very similar to the one I did. So there's number 2, or 3 actually. Whoops, where'd it go? Here we go. This is assignment number 2. So there's multiple parts to it. So this one has testing fundamentals and has localization, and it also has you're going to read a little bit. So how am I going to know you read? I'm taking your word for it. So the concept is you can cheat with all of the assignments if you want to, because you could probably download examples all over the place. But you're really just doing yourself an injustice, because how am I going to know if you read about localization at this particular link? But if you read about localization, you might be able to answer the question that's on the final, and you're probably going to learn something about it, hopefully. You're going to get something out of the course, hopefully. So, and if you do this tutorial, how am I going to know if you really did the tutorial? Don't know. I don't know if you just went and downloaded the solution. It's okay. Garbage in, garbage out, I don't want you to plagiarize, and you're supposed to be doing your own work. If I get to assignments, however, and I know I have an entire repository of repeated assignments that people have turned in over and over again. I have every one of the examples off of the Android website. I know if you've given me the solution file that's downloadable. There's a footprint on it. I know. I look in the archive file, I can see it. It's tagged. So don't give me the solution file that you haven't even opened up and looked at, because I'm going to be able to catch it, and you're not going to get any points for it. Essentially, you're going to get 0 credit for it. But you probably could just do the assignment in less time than trying to fix it so that you can turn something in that looks like the assignment. If you just did it, it probably would take less time. So anyway, so run through the tutorial. This is a very short tutorial, actually. So number 2 is actually pretty easy as well. Assignment number 3, I have to go back to the website because this is oh, it was here. Let's just go behacker.com. Assignment number 3 is the Notepad tutorial. This link is now a mirrored website, so I'll go to this link because there's not too many links left here. If you go to this link, you'll see what I'm talking about, because you'll look at this and go, oh yeah, that's the Android developer's website I'm so familiar with. I got the colors wrong, it's green. See this look and feel here? This is the old look. This is the old site. This is a mirrored site on the old site, the same Notepad tutorial that's on there. So this particular exercise, you have to read through the information, prepare for the exercise, download the archive zip file, run through the motions. It's going to take about, each one of these, there's assignment number, you're going to do the extra credit part 2, the assignment description is going to tell you what you need to do in the tutorial. When you run through the tutorial, that's where you're going to actually kind of go through the exercise. Each one of them should take you about an hour-ish, hour and a half-ish, depending upon your background knowledge, depending upon how much time you've been spending with this. And it shouldn't be an excessive amount of time as long as you can read and write. Because you're reading or cut and paste, essentially. You're reading instructions and you're following the instructions. And the instructions are pretty good. They're pretty foolproof. It's not like you have to think at all in terms of design. So the third program is the Notepad application, and you're going to do all 4 parts, including the extra credit, but it's not extra credit, it's part of the assignment, actually. Then there's an added twist to this. So the 3rd assignment and the 4th assignment have added, well, you'll see in a few minutes, there's an added twist to this one. It says, modify the notepad application above to store the GPS locations instead of notes. So it's going to have you play around with the GPS features. You do not need a phone for any of these particular projects. They should all work on the emulators. There's no testing that needs to be done on a real phone. So even the GPS works as we've seen. We can get the location by creating an instance of the location manager object. We know how to do that. I've gone through a couple of examples. So what you might end up having to do is go back and look at, oh, locations, GPS location. Oh, where was that example? And I'll show you where those examples are in a few minutes. And refresh your memory on that concept. So you're going to use a map view, map view. Add a button called view map. It's going to essentially put up a map with a longitude and latitude label. Actually, it's done for you already. You may cut and paste and use recycle code from any one of the examples I've given you. You don't have to write it from scratch. And I've given you an example on every one of these concepts. So you should be able to, if you wanted to, recycle examples that you've seen, which is, you know, pretty good in terms of cutting down some of the time it might take you. This particular assignment, the second part of it, the GPS stuff, because it's not, you know, tutorial, it's not given to you already. It might take you a few more minutes, you know, might take you a little bit more time. So this one is assignment number 3. Assignment number 4, and they get progressively harder, by the way, but not too hard. Assignment number 4 is also a 2-parter, and you're completing the activity testing, which is the second part of the testing tutorial. This is on the regular old, it's a different URL, but it's on the brand new Android remake site. So, and they've made actually the same version of the tutorial exists, but they actually improved it. So you got stuck reading the older version. It was a little bit longer, more reading if you have already done this assignment. But if you haven't done it yet, you're in luck because the assignment has less reading to do. Not so much, they broke out all of the diatribe on all of the testing and they put it into a separate doc that you don't actually have to read to get through the tutorial. So click on the link and you'll be able to follow through. And this is another, again, no thinking, just follow the steps, create the project, upload it. You're going to have another one that you can do on your own. This is going to be called a tip calculator. Do not give me the tip calculator that's in the Deedle and Deedle book. Chapter number 1 or 2 of the Deedle and Deedle book, that's the one I recommended for this course, has a tip calculator in it. And let me tell you, I've seen the tip calculator before. Write your own tip calculator. And in your tip calculator, you're going to write a tip calculator activity. And the user is going to input the percent that they wish to tip via a spinner. What a spinner is, take a look. Google it. It was one of the components I actually have shown you. So I have a spinner example, I think it's called spinner, believe it or not, in one of the example files. So they type into the text field the amount that they wish to tip on, and then you click on calculate, and it tells you the total amount plus the original amount. Basically calculates a tip for you. Feel free to make any variation that you'd like. So your tip calculator can be doing it in euros instead of dollars or something, or in something, you know. Can have graphics on it. You want to use a spinner though, but anything else you want to ad lib to it, yeah, you can do it. Be creative if you want. When you turn these in, you're only going to be able to turn in one file per assignment because of the EMS limitations. So put both the activity testing and the tip calculator all in the same file and label it project 4. Because inside of your project file, I'm going to be looking for the project. So, I mean, I'm looking for both parts, but I'll look for it in the same project. Unless they've changed it, I believe you can only upload one file right now. Is that how it works? I'm pretty sure this is just one file. Number 5 you're going to love. Maybe, maybe not. Number 5 is like the capstone assignment. It's a little bit harder than the rest of them. There's no excuses why you can't do number 1, 2, and 3. 4 and 5. 4 with that tip calculator might be a challenge, however, you can probably get through it. Number 5 is unique in its own right, which is actually not bad. it's only 5 points compared to, so even if you don't do it, there's a lot of students that don't turn in number 5. You can probably still get a decent grade in the class, but number 5 is going to take you a lot longer than the previous ones did. What are you going to do for part? Well, you got 2 parts. Part number 1, and they're both the same app. Project will have you create a restaurant application. So the application starts the screen. We'll show you a list of restaurants currently in the database. Database? You can use a database if you want. Actually, that's pretty easy. Or you can use a list, or you can use a text file. You can store the restaurants any way that you want. The list needs to scroll if it doesn't fit on the screen. The list only displays enough information about each restaurant, such as the name, so the user can identify it. So you can say, Chinese food, Mr. Chong's, Pizza Hut, pizza, American food, Denny's, It basically just puts like a description on there. When the user selects the restaurant, a second activity, so you're going to use an intent to switch between the activities. We have the restaurant detailed view. I gave you a sample that does a list view with a detailed view. If you're smart enough to find it, you can actually see half this application written for you already, because all you have to do is press on the items in the list view and you get the detailed view, and it's in one of the applications. I'm going to show you where to find those in a few minutes. So you're going to use an intent. You don't have to use an intent. You can do it any way you want. I just suggested a few minutes ago that you use an intent, but you don't have to do it that way. So when you press on it, you get more details, and usually you have a second activity. It's called. It's displayed all the information about the activity, and the information includes the restaurant name, the address, the phone number. If you don't know any restaurants, don't worry about it. Just create a dummy list of restaurants. Bob's Seafood, Mary's Spaghetti, whatever. So the application start screen also has a menu that allows the user to add new restaurants to the list. It's a pretty typical app, actually. And the menu brings up the user with an activity that allows them to enter into information. And the information about the restaurants is to be stored in the Android database. So so create a database for it. And I'm going to show you a database app today. Actually, we'll show you how to do the database part of it. We'll work with part 2 and part 3 here. So part 2 says, in the restaurant, add a button for the restaurant detail view that clicks on a map. So it shows you the location on the map. So we're going to use maps again. So you'll see the local location services as a map to implement this feature. For the assignment, you need to sign up for map key, blah, blah, blah. Here's just in case you don't know about it to get the key, or you can go through the map lecture to get it. Part 3, you're going to create a widget which displays one restaurant. The restaurant application, restaurant detail view, adds a display button to it. And the restaurant widget, actually part 3, believe it or not, I forgot to mention it to you. I probably should have modified it. I was going to take part 3 out of this. You don't actually have to do part 3 if you don't want to, because we don't really talk about widgets too much. And you don't actually have to worry about it. Optional part 3, for those people who are listening, or who have shown up today, who have been paying attention to the assignments. I was actually going to delete this. And I thought that I did. I thought there was just 2 parts to it. Because everyone went, what? It's really not that hard, actually. So if you do it, you're gonna create a widget which displays one restaurant. So in the detail view button, and then when the user clicks on it, it's gonna broadcast. It's gonna send out a running restaurant widgets on the phone to update themselves to display the information, that's on there. So don't worry about that concept, and it's not on the exam either. And don't worry about that particular feature. If you know what this is talking about, go ahead and do it if you want to. Otherwise, I can't really count it as extra credit, but it was supposed to have been deleted from the assignments. So skip part number 3, unless you really want to do it. And then, upload it just like everything else. So those were the 5 assignments for the course. So really, number 5, the restaurant app, and the number 4, the tip calculator, are the only 2 challenging ones. Seriously, the rest of it's all given to you. So it should be doable in a week if you haven't started yet. I'd start soon, though. Very soon. And if you're looking for the examples, let me point that out as well. What we're looking at is you've got the Android directory here. Supplemental notes is the link that you're looking for. supplemental notes. Inside the supplemental notes, you'll see special notes. Well, here's some stuff that I have gone over some of it, haven't gone over some of it. It's just a repository of examples. Towards the bottom is where you're going to see the SMS information. We're going to talk about test-driven development on Wednesday. JUnit testing, and I'm going to talk about, which I haven't hit yet. Example projects for layouts, miscellaneous features, maps, everything that I've gone over for the course, all those little examples that I've given you, including the ones today, are in this directory. So, and they're also, some of them are also linked to the YouTube videos. So if you look at the video for the lecture, and hopefully you know where those are right now, they are in the course materials. Excuse me, they're in the main menu here. They're in the summer 2012 video lectures. If you've missed a class and you want to see, well, what was on that lecture? You click on here, you look underneath the lecture in the notes on the description, you'll see, sometimes you'll see the zip files that are also provided. Another thing that you guys have the advantage of is looking at the previous term's lectures. So in the lectures subdirectory, nope, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken already. In the video lectures section towards the bottom of the screen, you'll see the lectures that were delivered the last time I taught this course, which are slightly different. The examples are different, the information is different. So this is another good resource. I've left this in here, and these here will be archived as well for the next round. But the assignments were different. Some of the lectures are slightly different. But a lot of people just thumb through it and kind of say, is there anything in here I want to see? Something on intents. Okay, wait a minute. Here's one on intents, you know. And about the order of the material delivery is about the same. So, questions about the assignments? No? Okay, good. No questions? So I'm going to stop this one here because, yes? Oh, good question. So somebody asked what version of the API or emulator. Anything you want. I support everything. Well, let me rephrase that. Anything from, let's see, that I can run on my computer easily from about, let's see, 1.5 to 4. Whatever the current one is, 4.03. So anything really. You will find, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the course, you'll find that the 2.3 is probably as low as you want to go. And you want to go that low sometimes because the VirtualBox emulators are really nice for the older. The newer ones are kind of touch and go. Although I did find recently a good 4.0 emulator that I've been giving out to people. So if you're looking for an emulator, let me know. I can probably give you an emulator. Otherwise, you can use the built-in emulators. It doesn't really matter because I can run it. I've got tons of emulators I can run your project on. In fact, here's the other thing too. So how am I going to grade your stuff? Luckily, the class is not that big. So I generally first spot check it to see, is it yours or is it somebody else's? Does it match anything else I've seen in this particular group or in previous groups? And then I go, oh, okay. And then I say, well, is this too good to be true? So like maybe 1 out of 5, I'll actually run it. The rest of them, I'll look at the code and go, okay, good. So you don't know if I'm going to run yours or not, and you don't know what kind of level of checking. But basically, I have a kind of a checklist of stuff I go through when I look at it to see, you know, first of all, is it yours? If it is yours, did you actually do the assignment? Is it the assignment? If it's not the assignment, you know, what is it? And then how far did you get through the assignment? Or is this the assignment solution that was offered to you from the website? And then through that level, and then you kind of make it, if you make it past a certain level, I give you credit for it. And it's usually all or nothing. If you don't make it past the first couple of levels, then your grade goes down significantly because you start getting zeros on everything. You want to make sure you do your own CSLO essay. You want to make sure that you do your own midterm.
That's in Word format.
It's in a Word format, yeah. So the projects are going to be submitted in a zip file format. The CSLO essay is going to be submitted in a Word file format. Let me go back up here. Oh, okay. I think the internet's going down. Well, okay, so the CSLO essay will be a Word format. The midterms are Word formats. Everything else is zip files, or tar, or huh? Yeah. Oh, you don't actually. You can use. You don't have to zip up a Word format. It's one file. When you have to send more than one file, is when you're going to compress it. Make sure you upload the correct assignment into the correct assignment spot. That's the other problem, because they're all in separate groups. So if you switch them around, I look and I go, oh, wrong assignment, 0. And then I get to the right assignment, I go, wrong assignment, 0. When really they were just reversed. So pay attention, make sure you're putting things in the correct spots. What is going on here? Vehicles down? Let's see. Nope, no, it's not down. You know what? Did we have a... Is our CSLO posted here? Oh, here it is. It's further down. Okay, here's the CSLO essay. It is posted. I just wanted to make sure it was posted here. Let me just revisit the syllabus real quick. Refresh my memory on the points. So the final exam is 25%. The CSLO is 25%. Those are the big... There's no midterm. That's what I was trying to check for. There's no midterm. There's a midterm in the Java class, but not in this one. So it's 50-50. So the assignments are important to do. So last time I had a midterm, and then I had the projects, and I pulled the midterm out, and I made this 50% instead of a midterm. And the assignments are actually worth 10 points each and not 5 points. So they're a little heavier weight. And there's 5 assignments worth 10 points. So that's a good thing I looked at this. So don't be looking for a midterm. There isn't one. Good question, though. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, so you can always think of questions and ask me. Only requests. What are the requests? Good grade. Well, give me good stuff. I'll give you a good grade.